Imagine two neighbors. They've lived next to each other for thousands of years. They speak different languages. They practice different religions. And each is convinced that they know their own history. But what if I told you that their genes tell a completely different story? In 2012, geneticists studied over 400 Armenians from 4 historical regions. In 2021, a large-scale study of the Turkish genome was completed. More than 3,300 people submitted DNA samples. These data reveal a stunning picture. Turks and Armenians, two nations divided by politics and united by geography. Their DNA holds secrets that date back 10,000 years. To the first farmers of the Neolithic, to the mysterious steppe nomads of the Bronze Age, to the catastrophe of 1200 BC that froze the genes of one people for 3 millennia. Today, we will unravel this mystery. And what you learn will make you see the map of the ancient world in a new light. Today, we will explore 4 key points. First, we will learn what genetic marker unites Turks and Armenians at a depth of hundreds of generations, and why it points to the Fertile Crescent. Second, we will trace the mysterious trail of ancient nomads in the genes of one nation, and their complete absence in the other. Third, we will find out why, after the collapse of Bronze Age civilizations, one of these nations found itself in a genetic time capsule. And finally, we will unveil the mystery of Central Asian heritage, the kind that makes up less than 10%, yet it is the reason that altered the language of an entire region. At the very end, I will tell you about a discovery from 2015. Geneticists found a link between modern Armenians and a man who died in the Alps 5,300 years ago. He is known as the Iceman Otzi, and this link explains what historians have struggled to understand for decades. In recent years, DNA sequencing technologies have revolutionized the field. What used to take years of work and cost millions can now be done in weeks. Scientists have gained access to ancient samples from burial sites that are thousands of years old, and each new study rewrites the history books. Today, anyone can take a genetic test and learn about their ancestors, things their parents and grandparents didn't know. Millions of people around the world have already done this, and many have received results that shocked them. Perhaps among you, there are those who discovered unexpected markers in their DNA. After this episode, you will understand where they might have come from, because the history of Turks and Armenians is not just the story of 2 nations. It is a mirror of all of Western Asia, a crossroads through which waves of migrations have reshaped half of Eurasia. And now, we will begin to unravel this tangled story from the very beginning. Did you know that a shared secret is hidden in the genes of Turks and Armenians, over 100 centuries old? Haplogroup J2M172. It emerged during the Neolithic era, when people first began to cultivate wheat and barley, when they domesticated sheep and goats, when they transitioned from hunters to farmers. Here are some astonishing numbers. Among Armenians, the frequency of this haplogroup ranges from 17 to 32%. Among Turks, its subclade J2A is found at 18.4%. 2 nations with a complicated history of coexistence, but the same ancient marker in their DNA. This is a genetic bridge between them. The legacy of common ancestors from the shores of the Middle East who were the first to sow seeds in the ground. The 2012 study led by Herrera encompassed 413 Armenians. Scientists found J2-M172 in all studied populations from the Ararat Valley to the mountainous Sassoon. But if the Neolithic united these peoples, what divided them? The answer to the question of the homeland of the first farmers has been sought for decades. And here's what geneticists discovered. Haplogroup G-M201. The 2014 study led by Kavkanisian established that this lineage originated somewhere between eastern Anatolia, Armenia, and western Iran. It was from there that ancient farmers moved northward to the Caucasus. The numbers confirm this theory. Among Armenians, GM201 constitutes 6 to 12.5%. Its even distribution across all regions indicates the deep antiquity of this marker. Among Turks, the figure is similar, around 10%. But the main discovery was not about percentages. Scientists proved that the Armenian Highlands were not just a habitat for ancient people. It was a crucial junction, a gateway through which Neolithic tribes spread in various directions around the world. Westward, toward the Mediterranean. Northward, toward the Caucasus Mountains. Eastward, into the depths of Asia. And each direction left its genetic mark. Now let's look at the main male line of Armenians, the haplogroup that tells about ancient migrations across the continent. R-M207. Herrera's study provided a clear picture across the 4 Armenian regions. The Ararat Valley, 38%. Gardman, 36. Lake Van, 33. Sassoon, 34. Every third Armenian man carries this marker. The majority of it is the Near Eastern branch, R1B1B1-L23, which comprises 31 to 33%. The picture among Turks is different. R1B is found at only 14.9%, and this is a mixture of different subclades. Now look at the surprising gradient. In ancient Anatolia, R1B was found in about 7% of the population. In Armenia, 1/3. In Ireland, 80%. This is the trace of a great migration. Farmers carried this haplogroup westward, through the Balkans, through all of Europe, to the Atlantic Ocean. But what made some of them stay? And what secret do the mountains of Sassoon hold? By the way, an interesting scientific fact. When geneticists studied Armenians from highland areas, they discovered a real anomaly. Haplogroup T-M184. In the Ararat Valley, it is found in 3.6% of men. In Gardman, 6.3%. In Lake Van, 3.9%. In Sassoon, 20.1%. This is 6 times higher than among their neighbors. How is that possible? The answer lies in geography. Sassoon is a rugged terrain. For centuries, its inhabitants had little interaction with the surrounding populations. Marriages were made within the community, generation after generation. Genetic drift did its job. Some markers strengthened, others almost disappeared. The mountains became not just a barrier to armies, they turned into a barrier for genes. This is a living example of how landscape shapes inheritance, how isolation creates genetic islands in the midst of a continent. But Sassoon is just a small story. What happened to entire nations? And this brings us to the main question. We have dissected the Armenian gene pool. What does the DNA of Turks hide? The Turkish Variome provided answers. Researchers led by Kars studied paternal lines, maternal lines, and the overall genome of the inhabitants from all regions of the country. Ready for the numbers? 2 key male haplogroups. R1b, 14.9%. R1a, 12.1%. Along with the already familiar J2a, they make up the foundation of the Turkish gene pool. At first glance, the picture seems similar to that of Armenians. The same Near Eastern roots, the same Neolithic markers. But the devil is in the details. When researchers divided the data by regions, they saw something unexpected. The western and eastern parts of Turkey turned out to be 2 different genetic worlds, as though 2 populations under one name. One gravitates toward the Balkans, the other toward the Caucasus, and between them lies ancient Anatolia with its own heritage. What created this boundary? Here are some mind-bending numbers. Haplogroup 12A. In the western provinces of Turkey, it reaches 20%. This is a typical Balkan marker, a legacy of ancient Europeans who lived here long before the Turkic language appeared. In the eastern part of the country, the picture is different. There, lineages associated with the Caucasus predominate. I2A is almost absent. The research by Kars revealed another astonishing fact. 28% of exome variants are unique to the Turkish population. 49% of rare genomic variants are not found anywhere else in the world. What does this mean? Turkey is not just a bridge between continents. It is a genetic melting pot where peoples have mixed for millennia. Balkan, Caucasian, Anatolian, and later, the Turkic tribes from Central Asia. Each wave left its mark on the DNA of the local population. But one question continued to perplex scientists. What share of the gene pool of modern Turks is made up of the heritage of those very Turkic conquerors from the 11th century? To understand this difference, we need to go back 5,000 years, to an era when everything changed. Around 3000 BC, the Yamnaya culture roamed the steppes north of the Black Sea. Martial pastoralists who were the first to tame the horse for riding, the first to put wheels on carts, and the first to speak a language from which almost all European languages descended. These people moved south and west. Their genes spread across Europe like a wave. But here's the strange thing. Anatolia, modern Turkey, remained on the sidelines of this flow. The 2022 study by Lazaridis established, Anatolia did not receive steppe admixture even throughout the Bronze Age. This is a striking contrast to all other lands where Indo-European languages later emerged. The steppe nomads bypassed Anatolia, but they found another route south, through the mountains where Armenians now reside. But here's what truly blows the mind. Haplogroup R-Z2103. Its descendant is the R-M12149 line. This is a direct genetic trace of the Yamnaya culture, a marker carried by steppe warriors in the 3rd millennium BC. In Europe, this lineage nearly disappeared. It was pushed aside by other peoples in the steppes. But the study by Lazaridis found it where no one expected it, in Bronze Age burials on Armenian territory. A direct quote from the scientific paper is striking. Patrilineal descendants of Yamnaya men, virtually extinct in Europe and the steppes, remained here. Scientists calculated the share of steppe admixture in ancient Armenians. On average, in the Bronze Age, about 14%. In the late phase, about 10%. These people brought not only genes with them, they also brought language, the very Proto-Indo-European from which Armenian descended, a relative of Greek, Persian, Russian. The language survived, but what happened to the genes of the conquerors? Around 1200 BC, the ancient world trembled. The Hittite Empire collapsed. Mycenaean palaces fell. Entire peoples disappeared. Historians call this the Bronze Age catastrophe. And it was during this time that something astonishing happened to the Armenians. The 2015 study by Haber revealed a clear boundary. Genetic signals of mixing with other populations in Armenians cease immediately after this date. A quote from the scientific paper reads like a sentence. After the collapse of Bronze Age civilizations, Armenians remained isolated. The internal genetic structure of their population formed only around 500 years ago. Think about it. 3,000 years without a significant influx of foreign genes. For comparison, most European peoples have actively mixed over the last 2,000 years. While the world around surged with migrations and conquests, the Armenian gene pool preserved memories of the Bronze Age, like an ancient manuscript hidden in a mountain monastery. But what was happening with their neighbors to the west during these centuries? A funny modern fact. Many believe that Turks are direct descendants of nomads from the depths of Asia. Indeed, Turkic tribes did conquer Anatolia. They brought their language, their culture, their name. But what does genetics say? The Turkish Variome provided precise figures. In terms of overall genome contribution from Central Asia, 9.59%. Through paternal lines, from 8.5 to 15.6%. Through maternal lines, 8.13%. 9 out of 10 ancestors of modern Turks lived in Anatolia long before the conquerors arrived. They cultivated this land for millennia, built cities, created civilizations. The conquerors brought language, but did not replace the people. They melted into the local population like a drop of ink in the sea. They changed the color, but not the composition of the water. Genetically, modern Turks are the descendants of ancient Anatolia. But what unites them with Armenians at an even deeper level? Now, let's look at maternal lines. Mitochondrial DNA is passed only from mother to children. It's the voice of our ancient mothers echoing through millennia. Haplogroups H, U, and T. The Turkish Variome showed their distribution. H, 27.55%. U, 19.53%. T, 10.99%. These are typical Near Eastern and European markers, the legacy of women who have lived in these lands since time immemorial. East Asian lines. D4C and G2A are rare. What does this mean? Turkic tribes primarily came as male warriors. They married local women, and their descendants carried the genes of Anatolian mothers. Maternal DNA preserves the memory of those who did not go anywhere, of the women who remained on their land while languages and empires changed around them. Common maternal roots of the Near East connect the peoples of this region deeper than any borders. But there is one connection that surprised even scientists. A story that sends chills down your spine. In 2015, geneticists were comparing Armenian DNA with ancient samples from around the world. They were searching for links and patterns, and stumbled upon something incredible. The analysis showed a genetic flow from a man who perished in the Alps 5,300 years ago. The very Ötzi, the famous ice mummy found on the border of Austria and Italy. Haber's study established about 29% of Armenian ancestry is linked to a population best represented by Neolithic Europeans, almost 1/3 of the gene pool. But how did the genes of this alpine hunter end up with people thousands of kilometers away? The answer leads us deep into the centuries. Neolithic farmers from the Middle East were divided into two waves. One headed west, through the Balkans into Europe. Ötzi was a descendant of that wave. The other remained in the east. From it, Armenians descended. Different paths, different fates, but common ancestors who lived more than 8,000 years ago. Genetics connected what geography divided. So, what have we learned about the genetics of Turks and Armenians? First, both peoples carry a powerful Neolithic trace. Haplogroups J2, G, and R1b link them to the first farmers of the Near East, a common foundation laid over 100 centuries ago. Second, Armenians received steppe admixture from the Yamnaya culture and preserved it in 3,000 years of isolation. That is why their language is Indo-European. Third, Turks adopted the Turkic language, but preserved the genetics of ancient Anatolia. 9 out of 10 ancestors are local population. Fourth, studies showed 29% of the Armenian gene pool traces back to the same Neolithic populations that spread throughout Europe. Different languages, different historical paths, but beneath these differences lies a shared heritage. Both peoples grew from the same region where agriculture originated and the new era of humanity began. What do these discoveries mean for us today? Now think about this. The genes recorded in your cells carry the memory of events from millennia ago, of farmers who were the first to sow seeds, of nomads who crossed the steppes on horseback, of women who passed on the legacy of this land from generation to generation. Each of us is a living archive, not the kind that gathers dust on shelves, but the kind that is passed from parents to children, from generation to generation. Turks and Armenians have argued for centuries over borders and history, but their DNA tells a different story. A story of common ancestors. A story of a region that gave birth to civilization. Perhaps genetics will one day remind us of what we have forgotten, that the borders between peoples are merely lines on a map, and beneath them lie common roots that stretch back through the millennia. DNA knows no flags. It knows only kinship. And it is this kinship that is our main discovery. And now about what I promised at the beginning. What explains the mystery of Armenian origins? The 2015 study by Haber examined 173 Armenians. Scientists searched for the nearest genetic relatives among the peoples of the world. The results were astonishing. On the European line, Armenians proved close to Spaniards, Italians, and Romanians. On the Near Eastern line, to Lebanese, Jews, Druze, and Cypriots. On the Caucasian line, to Georgians and Abkhazians. 3 worlds converged in one people: Europe, the Near East, and the Caucasus. This is what historians have struggled to understand for decades. Why is the Armenian language related to Greek, even though the peoples live far apart? Lazaridis provided the answer in 2022. Both languages inherited common traits from their Yamnaya ancestors. The steppe nomads divided. Some went to the Balkans and became the ancestors of the Greeks. Others descended through the mountains and gave rise to the Armenians. Different paths, one source. So what do you think? Do these genetic discoveries change your understanding of the origins of nations? Thousands of people today are taking DNA tests and discovering unexpected results. Finding kinship with peoples they never considered. Learning that their ancestors traveled paths not mentioned in family tales. Some of you may have already received similar results. Some are just considering a test. Write in the comments, what discoveries about your origins have you made? Were you surprised by today's story of Turks and Armenians? And the main question, what is more important, the genes we carry or the culture we choose? The blood of our ancestors or the language we think in? Genetics gives us facts, but the meaning of these facts is determined by us. Subscribe to the channel so you don't miss new genetic investigations. There are many more secrets that our DNA holds. And finally, do you know why the large-scale Turkish genetic study was conducted? Not just for history. The main goal is medicine. Scientists have found that standard European databases are poorly suited for diagnosing diseases in Turks. Too many unique variants, too many features that other peoples do not have. The same goes for Armenians. Long isolation has left its mark not only on history, but also on medical genetics. Today, DNA research helps find rare diseases. Tomorrow, it will allow tailoring treatment to specific individuals, to their unique genomes. We have looked into the past across hundreds of generations, but genetics also looks to the future. Perhaps it is the knowledge of ancient ancestors that will one day save someone's life. The story recorded in DNA continues, and each of us is a part of it.